Welcome back to US Power Watch. Ladies and gentlemen, the night the world changed forever has arrived. Iran has crushed Israel's so-called invincible air force into ruins. The legendary Nevatim airbase, home of the pride of the Israeli Air Force and America's most advanced F-35 stealth jets, now lies in smoldering wreckage. What was once hailed as an impregnable fortress of Western military technology has been reduced to a burning graveyard under a relentless barrage of Iranian hypersonic missiles. Not only Israel, America's billion-dollar bases across the Middle East, symbols of unchallenged superpower dominance, have also been turned into charred wastelands, their runways cratered, hangars shattered, and multi-million-dollar war machines left twisted and helpless on the ground. The myth of Israeli air superiority and American invincibility has been shattered in a single night. This is not just another skirmish. This is the beginning of a historic shift in the balance of power. Tonight, we expose the full truth that Western media desperately tries to hide. In this explosive episode of US Power Watch, we reveal how Iran crushed Israel's invincible air force into ruins and turned America's billion-dollar bases into burning graveyards. How did Iranian hypersonic missiles bypass billion-dollar defense systems in minutes? Why are US forward bases now smoldering wastelands? And what does this mean for American power in the Middle East? From shattered F-35s on the ground to the limits of Western military supremacy, we uncover the hard truths mainstream media won't show you. If you want unfiltered analysis and real strategic insights, hit like right now, subscribe to US Power Watch, and turn on notifications. Let's dive in. Now let us go straight to the heart of what happened on that historic night. Iran launched a meticulously coordinated, multi-layered assault that caught Israel's much-celebrated air defenses completely off guard. The primary target was Nevatim Air Base. Deep in the Negev desert, the crown jewel of the Israeli Air Force, and home to dozens of America's most advanced F-35 stealth fighter jets, wave after wave of Iranian drones first filled the skies as cheap decoys. These slow-moving, unmanned aerial vehicles forced Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow systems to fire expensive interceptors at low-value targets. While the defense batteries were busy, Iranian cruise missiles skimmed low over the terrain, evading radar detection. Then came the decisive blow: hypersonic ballistic missiles, including the advanced Fatah series, streaking in at speeds exceeding Mach 10. Israeli and American officials had repeatedly claimed their multi-billion-dollar defense shield was nearly impenetrable. Yet on that night, the shield failed spectacularly. Satellite imagery and independent sources confirmed multiple direct impacts on Nevatim's reinforced aircraft hangars. Several underground shelters, designed to withstand heavy bombardment, were breached. Runways were left with deep craters, rendering them unusable for immediate operations. Eyewitness videos from the area showed massive fireballs lighting up the desert sky as fuel depots and ammunition storage erupted in flames. The damage was not limited to Nevatim. Ramon Air Base, another key facility in the south, also suffered heavy strikes. Hangars that once housed advanced fighter jets now stand as twisted metal skeletons. Reports indicate that a significant number of F-35 aircraft, each costing over $100 million, were either destroyed on the ground or severely damaged beyond quick repair. Meanwhile, America's own forward bases did not escape the fury. Several key United States installations across the Middle East, including Al-Assad in Iraq and other strategic outposts, came under intense attack. These billion-dollar facilities, meant to project American power, were turned into scenes of chaos. Runways were cratered, radar systems disabled, and critical logistics hubs set ablaze. Early estimates placed the material damage to American assets in the region at hundreds of millions of dollars within the first waves alone. What makes this assault even more devastating is the asymmetry. Iran used a combination of low-cost drones as bait and high-precision, high-speed ballistic missiles as the hammer. Israel's defense doctrine, built around technological superiority and layered interception, was overwhelmed by sheer volume and sophisticated maneuvering warheads that changed course in the terminal phase. Western media quickly tried to downplay the event, speaking only of limited damage and most missiles intercepted. But the visual evidence tells a different story. Thick, black smoke rising for hours, emergency crews working through the night, and Israeli fighter jets grounded while their bases burned. This was not a random barrage, it was a calculated strike that exposed the vulnerability of assets once considered untouchable. The so-called invincible Israeli Air Force was forced to watch its most prized platforms destroyed not in aerial combat, but while sitting helplessly in their shelters. In just one night, Iran rewrote the rules of engagement in the region. The myth of absolute air superiority has been shattered, and America's billion-dollar bases have become burning graveyards under the desert sky. That concludes the raw military timeline. In the next part, we will examine the specific weapons and technology that made this possible. In the previous part, we saw how Iran's coordinated assault turned Nevatim and other key bases into burning graveyards. Now, let us examine the advanced weapons and sophisticated technology that made this historic blow possible. At the center of Iran's success stood its hypersonic missile family, led by the formidable Fateh series. The Fateh 1 can reach speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15. It carries a maneuverable re-entry vehicle that allows it to change trajectory both outside and inside the atmosphere, making interception extremely difficult for traditional defense systems. Even more impressive is the Fateh 2, a hypersonic glide vehicle. After the booster stage separates, the glide vehicle ignites a second-stage liquid fuel motor upon re-entry. This enables unpredictable lateral and vertical maneuvers at hypersonic speeds. Current air defense systems, including Israel's Arrow 3 and America's Patriot and THAAD batteries, struggle to track and engage such rapidly maneuvering targets in the terminal phase. Supporting the Fateh strikes were the Khaybar-Shekan and Khorramshahr 4 missiles. The Khaybar-Shekan, a solid-fuel medium-range ballistic missile, offers a range of approximately 1,450 kilometers with high accuracy. Its solid propellant allows rapid launch preparation from mobile platforms, giving Iran great flexibility in timing and location. The Khorramshahr 4, also known as Khaybar in some variants, carries a heavy warhead of up to 1,500 kilograms and can reach targets up to 2,000 kilometers away. These missiles delivered powerful kinetic impacts that penetrated hardened aircraft shelters at Nevatim Air Base. What truly overwhelmed the defenses, however, was Iran's multi-layered swarm tactic. The assault began with hundreds of low-cost drones acting as decoys. These inexpensive unmanned aerial vehicles forced Israel's Iron Dome batteries to expend their expensive Hypersonic, each costing around $50,000. While the defense systems were saturated and distracted, the cruise missiles flew at low altitude, hugging the terrain to avoid early detection. Finally, the hypersonic ballistic missiles delivered the knockout punch, arriving at speeds so high that reaction time was measured in seconds rather than minutes. This asymmetric approach exposed a fundamental weakness in Western defense philosophy. Israel and the United States have invested tens of billions of dollars in layered missile defense systems designed primarily against slower, predictable threats. The Iron Dome performs well against unguided rockets from groups like Hezbollah. The Arrow system targets longer-range ballistic missiles in the exo-atmosphere. Yet when faced with a coordinated barrage combining cheap swarms, low-flying cruise missiles, and high-speed maneuvering hypersonic warheads, the entire network became overloaded. The cost disparity is staggering. Each Tamir interceptor fired by the Iron Dome costs tens of thousands of dollars. An Arrow missile can cost several $1,000,000 per shot. In contrast, many of Iran's drones cost only a few $1,000s each. Even the advanced ballistic missiles represent a fraction of the price of the high-tech interceptors sent to stop them. Iran essentially forced its opponents into an unsustainable economic exchange, spending millions to defend against weapons that cost thousands. Moreover, Iran developed these capabilities under decades of strict international sanctions. This demonstrates remarkable self-reliance and engineering ingenuity. Iranian scientists mastered solid and liquid propulsion technologies, advanced guidance systems, and maneuverable re-entry vehicles without access to Western components. The Fatah series, in particular, showcases indigenous innovation in hypersonic glide technology that many analysts once believed was beyond the reach of nations facing heavy sanctions. On the night of the attack, this technological edge became brutally clear. Videos recorded by local residents showed bright streaks descending rapidly toward the desert, followed by massive explosions that lit up the night sky for miles. Satellite images later revealed multiple impact craters directly on Nevatim's taxiways and hardened aircraft shelters. Several F-35 jets, each valued at more than $100 million, were caught on the ground. Repairing or replacing them in wartime conditions presents enormous logistical challenges, especially with disrupted supply chains from the United States. The same pattern repeated at American bases. Facilities designed to project power across the region saw their runways cratered and critical infrastructure damaged by precisely guided warheads. The once dominant narrative of technological superiority began to crumble as footage emerged of burning hangars and disabled radar installations. This assault was not based on luck. It resulted from years of careful planning, realistic testing, and a clear understanding of the opponent's defense architecture. Iran studied the strengths and, more importantly, the vulnerabilities of systems like Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow, Patriot, and THAAD. They designed tactics specifically to exploit saturation, decoys, low-altitude flight paths, and terminal phase maneuvering. In doing so, Iran has challenged a core assumption of Western military strategy, that expensive technology alone guarantees dominance. The events of that night proved that determination, innovation under pressure, and smart asymmetric tactics can neutralize even the most advanced and costly defense networks. The images of shattered runways at Nevatim and smoldering American bases serve as a powerful reminder. No system is truly invincible when confronted with the right combination of speed, numbers, and ingenuity. As the smoke continues to rise over these former symbols of power, the world must reconsider long-held beliefs about military superiority in the modern era. This concludes our deep dive into the weapons and technology behind Iran's stunning strike. In the next part, we will analyze America's immediate reaction and the broader geopolitical implications of this shift in the balance of power. After witnessing the devastating strikes that turned Nevatim Air Base into ruins and left American facilities smoldering, the world waited anxiously for Washington's response. What followed revealed the uncomfortable truth about the current limits of American power in the Middle East. In the immediate hours after the Iranian barrage, the Pentagon issued carefully worded statements claiming that damage was limited and that most incoming missiles had been intercepted. Yet behind the scenes, frantic activity told a different story. The United States rushed additional THAAD missile defense batteries to the region and repositioned several Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with advanced Aegis systems. However, these reinforcements came with a striking caveat. American naval assets were ordered to maintain a much greater distance from potential threat zones. For the first time in decades, United States carrier strike groups operated hundreds of miles farther from the coast than usual. This tactical retreat was not presented as weakness, of course. Pentagon spokespeople described it as prudent force protection and a smart adjustment in operational posture. In reality, it exposed a harsh new reality. Even the most powerful navy in the world now hesitates to bring its most expensive assets within range of Iran's proven anti-ship and ballistic missile capabilities. On land, the situation was even more concerning. Several key American bases, including Al-Assad in Iraq and other strategic outposts, sustained significant damage. Runways were cratered, logistics warehouses burned, and critical radar installations were knocked offline. Independent assessments estimated the total material damage to United States facilities across the region at approximately $800 million within the first 2 weeks alone. This figure includes destroyed infrastructure, damaged aircraft on the ground, and the high cost of emergency repairs under combat conditions. Compounding the physical damage was the human and operational toll. reports emerged that thousands of American troops were forced to relocate from their primary bases. Some personnel began operating remotely from hotels and temporary offices in safer areas, while fighter squadrons continued missions from dispersed locations. This unprecedented dispersal of forces highlighted how Iran's precision strikes had disrupted the United States' carefully built forward presence. The Biden administration, or whichever leadership was in place at the time, faced mounting pressure on multiple fronts. Publicly, Washington reaffirmed its ironclad commitment to Israel's security and promised continued military support. Privately, however, senior officials urged restraint. The fear was clear: a wider direct confrontation with Iran could spiral out of control, threatening global energy markets, inflaming domestic political divisions, and stretching American military resources already committed to other strategic theaters. This internal tension became visible in the diplomatic sphere. The United States quietly increased pressure on Israel to accept a temporary ceasefire framework, even as Israeli leaders pushed for more aggressive retaliatory strikes. For Washington, the priority shifted from total victory to damage control. Protecting the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, preventing a broader regional war, and preserving what remained of America's deterrent credibility became the new focus. The most telling sign of strain appeared in America's naval posture. For generations, the sight of United States aircraft carriers steaming close to hostile shores served as the ultimate symbol of power projection. Now, those same carriers operated at safer distances, launching aircraft from afar, while avoiding the risk of saturation attacks by Iranian missiles. This operational adjustment, though framed as tactical flexibility, signaled the end of an era. The age of unchallenged gunboat diplomacy in the Persian Gulf appeared to be waning. Furthermore, the attacks exposed vulnerabilities in America's high-tech defense umbrella. Even systems like Patriot and THAAD, long advertised as the gold standard, struggled against the sheer volume and sophistication of the Iranian barrage. Several advanced radar arrays supporting these systems were reportedly hit early in the exchanges, temporarily blinding parts of the defensive network. In Washington, the political consequences began to mount. Lawmakers from both parties demanded briefings on the extent of the damage and the adequacy of force protection measures. Questions arose about why bases, housing tens of thousands of American personnel, had not been better hardened or dispersed in advance. The narrative of American military invincibility, carefully cultivated for decades, now faced serious scrutiny both at home and abroad. Meanwhile, the economic ripple effect spread quickly. Oil prices spiked as traders feared disruptions in the region. Stock markets reacted nervously to the prospect of prolonged instability. Allies in Europe and Asia watched closely, quietly reassessing their reliance on American security guarantees in an era where even the superpowers' forward bases could be directly challenged. Iran's strategy succeeded in forcing the United States into a difficult dilemma. Washington could neither ignore the attacks without losing credibility, nor escalate fully without risking a costly and unpredictable wider war. This dilemma forced a more cautious approach, one that prioritized containment over confrontation. The images of burning American facilities and grounded F-35 jets at Israeli bases have circulated widely, despite efforts to control the narrative. They serve as a powerful visual reminder that no amount of technological investment can fully eliminate vulnerability when an adversary combines innovation, determination, and asymmetric tactics. As smoke still rose from damaged runways and hangars, the United States found itself in an unfamiliar position, reacting rather than dictating events. The superpower that once shaped the Middle East with relative ease now grappled with new constraints on its freedom of action. This episode has laid bare the shifting realities of modern warfare. Expensive platforms and sophisticated systems remain important, but they are no longer sufficient on their own. Will and strategic ingenuity increasingly matter just as much, if not more. In the next part, we will explore the human and psychological dimension of this conflict, the unbreakable will of the Iranian people versus the growing cracks in Israeli and American confidence. While advanced missiles and billion-dollar defense systems dominate the headlines, The true decisive factor in this conflict lies in something far more powerful: the human spirit and national will. On one side stands Iran, a nation that has endured decades of severe economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and repeated military threats. Yet instead of breaking, the Iranian people have forged an unbreakable resolve. This is not mere propaganda. It is the lived reality of a society that views resistance as a matter of national dignity and survival. From scientists working in underground laboratories to soldiers maintaining launches in remote deserts, Iranians have internalized the belief that no external pressure can force them to surrender their sovereignty. This collective willpower has translated directly into technological innovation and battlefield determination. When the order came to strike, there was no hesitation. The missiles flew not only because of engineering excellence, but because thousands of individuals believed deeply in the justice of their cause. Contrast this with the situation inside Israel. For decades, Israeli society was told that their nation possessed an invincible shield and an unbeatable air force. The Iron Dome was marketed as an impenetrable defense. The F-35 was presented as the ultimate guarantor of air superiority. That comforting narrative collapsed on a single night. When residents of Tel Aviv and surrounding areas heard explosions and saw flames rising from military bases, panic spread quickly. Videos captured by ordinary citizens showed people rushing to bomb shelters, not with calm discipline, but with visible fear and confusion. The myth of absolute security had been shattered, and with it, public confidence in their leadership and military technology began to erode. Reports from inside Israel speak of a growing brain drain. Many highly educated professionals, especially in the technology and defense sectors, have quietly begun exploring options to relocate to Europe or the United States. They cite constant rocket alerts, disrupted daily life, and a deep sense of insecurity. Even those who remain express increasing frustration. Families in the north, near the Lebanese border, have lived for weeks in temporary housing after their towns were turned into ghost settlements. The once proud narrative of Israel as a safe haven for the Jewish people now rings hollow for many. This psychological shift is profound. A nation that built its identity around strength and self-reliance is now forced to confront its vulnerability. When citizens lose faith in their defense systems, when young people question whether staying is worth the constant danger, the foundations of national morale begin to crack. No amount of American financial aid can restore that lost sense of security. On the American side, the strain is equally visible, though more carefully hidden. United States troops stationed in the region have faced repeated alerts and base attacks. Many soldiers, far from home, now question the strategic purpose of their deployment. Pentagon officials work overtime to maintain morale, yet private conversations reveal growing fatigue. The knowledge that even heavily fortified bases can be struck by precision missiles creates a constant underlying tension. For a military that prides itself on technological dominance, these attacks represent more than physical damage. They strike at the confidence of the force itself. The contrast could not be clearer. Iran fights with the conviction that it is defending its homeland and its right to exist as a sovereign power. Its people see the conflict as an existential struggle against foreign domination. This sense of purpose creates extraordinary resilience. In contrast, both Israel and the United States are fighting to preserve a status quo that increasingly appears unsustainable. Their populations are asked to support expensive, open-ended engagements while facing daily reminders of vulnerability. That is a much harder sell. History has repeatedly shown that willpower often outweighs material superiority. Vietnam, Afghanistan, and countless other conflicts demonstrated that a determined adversary willing to absorb punishment can exhaust even the strongest superpower. Iran appears to have absorbed this lesson well. By maintaining a steady but measured pressure, it forces its opponents to bear enormous economic and psychological costs, while keeping its own casualties and infrastructure damage relatively controlled. The human dimension also explains why Iran's asymmetric strategy has proven so effective. Every cheap drone that forces an expensive interceptor to launch represents not just a financial victory, but a psychological one. Each time an Iranian missile reaches its target despite billion-dollar defenses, it sends a message. Your technology is not invincible, your safety is not guaranteed. Over time, these repeated demonstrations wear down confidence far more effectively than any single large-scale battle. As the conflict continues, this battle of wills becomes increasingly central. Iran shows no signs of fatigue or internal division over its resistance strategy. Meanwhile, cracks are appearing in the unity that once defined the Israeli-American partnership. Public opinion in both countries grows more divided with each passing week of tension and uncertainty. In the end, wars are not won solely by machines or money. They are decided by who possesses the stronger spirit, the clearer purpose, and the greater willingness to endure. On that crucial battlefield of human resolve, Iran currently holds a significant advantage. The burning graveyards at Nevatim and America's damaged bases are not merely scenes of material destruction. They are symbols of a deeper shift. The moment when technological arrogance met unbreakable national will and the myth of invincibility began to crumble. In the final part of this analysis, we will examine the broader global implications and how this conflict is accelerating the emergence of a new, multipolar world order. The images of shattered runways at Nevatim and burning American bases are not isolated incidents. They represent something far larger, the visible cracking of the post-Cold War unipolar order and the acceleration toward a genuinely multipolar world. For more than 3 decades, the United States has positioned itself as the indispensable superpower, the ultimate guarantor of security for its allies, especially Israel. That assumption rested on 2 pillars: overwhelming technological superiority and the unchallenged ability to project power anywhere in the world. The events of recent weeks have dealt a serious blow to both pillars. Iran's successful strikes demonstrated that a determined regional power, operating under heavy sanctions, can effectively challenge American military dominance in its own backyard. The fact that hypersonic missiles and coordinated drone swarms could penetrate and damage some of the most protected airbases and forward installations has sent shockwaves through defense establishments from Washington to Brussels and Tel Aviv. The myth that Western technology is always decisive has been exposed as fragile. This shift carries profound geopolitical consequences. First and foremost, it weakens the credibility of American security guarantees. Allies across the Middle East and beyond are quietly reassessing their reliance on Washington. If the United States struggles to protect its own bases and its closest partner Israel from sustained missile attacks, how reliable are its promises to other nations? Countries that once saw alignment with America as the safest bet are now considering hedging strategies, including closer ties with Russia, China, and other emerging powers. The economic dimension is equally significant. Global energy markets reacted immediately to the heightened tensions. Oil prices surged as traders feared potential disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Although full closure has not occurred, the mere threat has reminded the world how vulnerable the current energy architecture remains. Nations dependent on Middle Eastern oil, particularly in Europe and Asia, are accelerating efforts to diversify sources and invest in alternative energy pathways. This episode has underscored the strategic risk of depending too heavily on a region where American influence is visibly waning. At the same time, Russia and China have watched these developments with calculated interest. Moscow has maintained a pragmatic relationship with Tehran, providing diplomatic cover and certain technological cooperation. Beijing, while avoiding direct involvement, benefits from a distracted United States and higher energy prices that strengthen its bargaining position in global trade. Both powers see the current conflict as validation of their long-held view that American unipolar dominance is neither permanent nor inevitable. The rise of BRICS and other alternative frameworks gains momentum as nations seek platforms less dominated by Western institutions. Perhaps most importantly, this conflict has accelerated the erosion of the myth of Western military invincibility. For years, mainstream narratives portrayed Israel as a military powerhouse whose technological edge made it nearly unbeatable. Similarly, American forces were presented as capable of decisive victory in any theater. The sight of F-35 jets damaged on the ground and billion-dollar bases turned into smoking ruins has shattered that carefully constructed image. Social media and independent analysts have spread these visuals globally, bypassing traditional gatekeepers. Young people in many countries now question the wisdom of tying their futures to a declining unipolar system. Inside the United States, the domestic fallout is becoming harder to ignore. Questions are being raised about the enormous annual military aid provided to Israel, now totaling billions of dollars each year. Taxpayers are beginning to ask why their money is being used to sustain a conflict that increasingly appears unwinnable without dragging America deeper into direct confrontation. Political divisions are sharpening, with some voices calling for a more restrained foreign policy focused on domestic priorities, while others double down on traditional alliances. This internal debate further constrains Washington's freedom of action on the international stage. For Israel itself, the consequences extend beyond the military realm. The loss of confidence in its air defenses and the visible damage to its strategic assets have triggered a deeper identity crisis. A nation long defined by its military strength and technological innovation now faces uncomfortable questions about its long-term sustainability in a hostile neighborhood. The growing exodus of skilled professionals adds another layer of concern, as human capital has always been Israel's greatest strategic asset. The broader lesson emerging from these events is clear. The era of unchallenged Western hegemony is drawing to a close. Conflicts can no longer be decided solely by superior technology or financial resources. Nations that combine technological adaptation, asymmetric innovation, and strong national will are proving capable of reshaping regional dynamics in ways that were unimaginable just a decade ago. We are witnessing the painful birth of a new multipolar reality. In this emerging order, power is more diffuse, alliances are more fluid, and no single actor can dictate outcomes with the ease that America once enjoyed. Countries like Iran have shown that consistent resistance and strategic patience can yield results against even the strongest opponents. As the smoke slowly clears from the burning graveyards of Nevatim and America's damaged bases, the world stands at a historic inflection point. The old certainties are fading. New centers of influence are rising. The balance of power that defined the early 21st century is undergoing a fundamental transformation. The question now is not whether this shift will continue, but how quickly and how peacefully the international community will adapt to it. One thing is certain, the events of recent weeks have made it impossible to return to the old status quo. The world has changed, and it will never look quite the same again. This concludes our 5-part analysis of how Iran crushed Israel's so-called invincible air force and turned America's billion-dollar bases into burning graveyards. The story is far from over, but the direction of history has become unmistakably clear. Thank you for watching US Power Watch. In our next episode, we will examine what the coming weeks and months may bring as this historic confrontation enters its next phase. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this special analysis. From the shattered runways of Nevatim to the burning graveyards of America's billion-dollar bases, the message is unmistakable. Iran has crushed Israel's so-called invincible air force and exposed the limits of American military power in a single decisive night. The myth of Western technological supremacy lies in ruins. What was once considered untouchable has been proven vulnerable. The era of unchallenged dominance is fading before our eyes, giving way to a new multipolar reality where willpower, innovation, and strategic courage can challenge even the strongest powers. The events we have examined tonight mark a historic turning point in the balance of power in the Middle East and beyond. What do you think will happen in the next phase of this confrontation? Will Iran continue to reshape the region? Can the United States and Israel regain their lost deterrence? Or has the shift become irreversible? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. We read every comment. If you found this analysis valuable and want more unfiltered strategic insights, please hit the like button right now, subscribe to US Power Watch, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with friends who want to understand the real changes happening in our world. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay vigilant. We will see you in the next episode of U.S. Power Watch.